this Sunday afternoon. You're watching Alistair Stewart and Friends. Well, it's a scandal that's affected so many women and also men. The victims of unnecessary mesh operations say they've been failed by the government after it failed to implement all of the recommendations of a report into rectal and hernia mesh implants.
It comes after the vaginal mesh implant scandal, which had painful and devastating side effects for thousands of women. Now, there are calls to implement the recommendations made in a report called the First Do No Harm Report, which was published in June 2020 by the Independent Medicines and Medical Devices Safety Review Team, which found that women who were not being listened to or believed led to emergencies, misdiagnosis, and years of unnecessary pain.
Now, one of those women who's still suffering from one of these procedures is Paula Goss, who was given a rectopexy mesh, a sacropolpoxy mesh and a colphory mesh. The controversial operation has led her to getting only minimal sleep every night and is unable to work due to the chronic pain. Paula, you join us in the studio this afternoon. Thank you so much for coming in. So how has it been for you dealing with this, living with this pain and then the frustrations of the recommendations not being implemented?
It's been very difficult, not just for me, for thousands. I can cope with what I'm going through. It's not easy, but I'm coping with it. The reason why I campaign is for everybody else, because our meshes, which are bowel mesh as well as hernia mesh, are not recognised as they should be, the same as the other meshes. And a lot of the people with bowel mesh and hernia mesh end up with such complications that they lose their bowel, their bladders and other parts of their anatomy, which is not a good thing. And so this is why we're here to try and campaign for all. And it affects men, women and children on meshes as well, sadly.
What it's like day to day for you? What are the difficulties that you face that perhaps you didn't have to face prior to this operation?
Before the mesh complications started with me, I was very active. I had horses. I used to ride a lot, show the horses a lot, ride, walk. I worked as a taxi driver. Now it's difficult going on long journeys. You have to plan. You have to plan where the toilets are because you have the urgency still. And back pain is a big part of it as well because of where the Protacs are placed when they put the meshes inside you. So day to day it's living with painkillers for a lot of people, and that in itself can cause problems and issues. So yeah, it's just not very nice, and you know the recommendations should all be put in place, all of them. They really should be put in place. There's three parts, three issues that were as part of the Cumberland Review. Primodos and valproate I'm not an expert in, but they're just as valid as all the meshes are. And it's affecting not just our lives, it affects our families' lives because people have lost marriages, homes, jobs, all because of the complications. And the government aren't seeing the bigger picture here.
I mean, it's called a scandal within a scandal, isn't it? Because initially this revolutionary surgery and procedure was introduced, then the pain and the experience of women were basically, and all patients actually, were then ignored. There was then the review, and then, like you say, the recommendations of the review haven't been implemented fully. What do you think the reason for that is? Do you think it's because, women's health just isn't prioritised in the same way? What would be your take on that?
I think part of that, yes, but I think the biggest issue is all these complications were not registered properly. Men are not going to go and tell somebody there's something wrong, especially when it involves that area of them. They're not going to go when there's something wrong with them that's very minor, are they? All these complications have not been registered properly anyway. So when they're saying, oh, well, the complication rate is that is not the correct figures, because I've never been put into that system, nor has Deb, and nor has many of the people and we've got thousands on the groups. I founded one group, Rectopexy Mesh Victims and Support, but we have all mesh injured on there. But I'm also the Rectopexy Ambassador on Mesh UK Charitable, which is another group as well. And we're talking thousands, not just UK-wide, but globally. UK-wide, yes, it's trying to get the government to do something. The Scottish government, they've listened. They're doing stuff for the ladies that are suffering in Scotland. Ours aren't.
And Deb, obviously you're here as well, also a patient and a survivor of this scandal. What's your experience been?
Horrendous. I had rectopexy mesh in 2012. I had it removed last year because of the pain and complications it was causing, but I had to have an ileostomy, and then I had to go in for a reversal, and since I had my reversal, it's been an absolute nightmare. I have to take a bucket when I go out. I hardly go out, so because it comes on that quick. I hardly drive it anywhere. I've only just started driving for about a year, because I can't sit for too long. Sometimes if I get the pain, I can't sit, and I physically am closing my eyes and, really, because the pain comes on that much, and I've just been left in this condition.
What support are you getting, if any?
None. Absolutely none. We contacted the local hospital. I went for a sigmoidoscopy in February. I had to ring up for my own results because I hadn't heard. And they said, we'll be in touch. They wanted me to go for biofeedback. My doctors even emailed them in May, and they've not even replied to my doctor.
The problem is, sorry to interrupt you, part of one of the recommendations was to open these mesh centres. These mesh centres, they're saying they're pelvic, but some of our meshes were pelvic mesh. We're not accepted in these mesh centres at the moment. It's purely anybody that has had mesh for stress incontinence or vaginal mesh. But they're not adequately functioning either, because a lot of these people that actually are running these centres put meshes in these women in the first place, and they a lot of them, especially anything that's pexy, is a permanent implant. So whereas I had rectopexy and sacrocolpopexy, as did many, these meshes are really difficult to get out. But we can't go anywhere. The NHS and Nadine Dorris stated that there would be a statement in the autumn as to whether these centres are going to accept rectopexy, which will include men and women. Well, that's not acceptable either, is it? Because where can we go now? We've only got the support of each other in our groups. We can't get the support in the hospitals because they don't know what they're doing. The mesh centres won't accept us because we don't have the correct type. So that in itself is wrong.
What do you think needs to change then going forward? What help do you need immediately would make a difference to you both?
I think they need to be speaking to the actual victims of this and the campaigners of this. I challenge Sajid Javid and Nadine Dorris to come and have a conversation with me personally, if you like, but also with us on our group, and see what's actually happening. And then they might see the way forward. We're not being consulted about these mesh centres. They're not talking to us and getting what we can tell them what people need. So that's what needs to change. It's the whole culture of that needs to change.
There'll be people at home, lots of people at home who will be affected by this, who maybe aren't aware of the support groups out there. What would you say to people who are also suffering not only the physical pain, but also, as you were saying, the disruption to your lives? What would you say to those people?
They need to reach out. They can find us. There's many groups out there that will offer a myriad of different supports and campaigns and things for them, but they need to reach out, because a lot of them go to their GP and they're pushed aside. They try to go to hospital for even A&E, and they're pushed aside because they really don't know and understand what these people are going through. And it is not just a physical thing. It is an emotional thing with a lot of them, because they are really struggling. It's been a trauma what they've gone through, so they really need everything.
And you mentioned earlier that this doesn't just affect you personally, it's affecting your family, your mental health. I mean, what impact has this had on your family life?
Oh, I mean, I'm not the person that I was before I had the mesh implant. I'm not the happy-go-lucky woman that my husband married. He'll tell you himself. I think I've aged in the last 6 years of having it. And you've got to plan if you're going anywhere. So you can't socially go out and meet your friends unless you can locate that there's a toilet nearby, or unless the journey, you can calculate the journey and you know what you're going to do. It's very, very difficult. And the job loss. A lot of people lose their jobs because they can't do the jobs because of what the illness has done to them. Failing marriages because of it. There's just so many things that have happened, aren't they?
Yeah.
And like yourself, you know, Debbie is similar to me in a way. We have a love of horses and things, but you just can't do it.
No.
So your hobby's taken, your job's taken. They might as well just take your life then, haven't they, really?
Oh, guys, well, thank you both for coming in. You speak with such dignity, and I imagine lots of people watching at home will be so pleased to know that there are people out there fighting on their behalf and that they're not alone. So thank you both coming in, Paula.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We should just say Health Minister Nadine Dorries has said the government's full response to the review will be given to Parliament before the end of this year. Now, you're watching Alistair